Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. We really appreciate you joining us today. The webinar that we're doing today is going to discuss how EMR is impacting your bottom line and opportunities to improve. So hope you enjoy it. So my name is John Wiggin. I'm a senior construction consultant for Autodesk. I worked in the industry for about 34 years, commercial construction, large construction firms. Yeah, so that's me. Laura?
Hi, my name is Laura Talbot. I am a programs manager in our construction customer success group here at Autodesk. I also logged about 8 years working in the construction industry for a large commercial general contractor prior to joining Autodesk. So before we start, just want to make sure to remind you that everyone is muted to reduce background noise. If you do have a question during the presentation, that's great. Please use the question dialog box. We will get back to you at the end of the presentation. We'll likely put those answers to those questions on a forum post on the BIM 360 product forum. And as a reminder, a link to this recorded session is going to be emailed to all registrants that are here today, so you won't lose all of this great content.
Awesome. So EMR, what is it? So EMR is your experience modification rate. It has a very strong impact on the amount of money that the insurance companies will charge to allow you to perform work in the construction industry. An EMR of 1 is a benchmark average for the industry these days. Over 1 tends to be a bit distressing from a risk standpoint to insurance companies, and an EMR lower than 1 obviously is a much lower risk environment for insurance companies and provides for lower rates. So with that, you can put up the poll. Do you know your company's EMR currently? And if you do, please weigh in and let us know. Okay, Tristan, can we see the results? 87% of folks are not sure. That's interesting. Yeah, it is a nuanced rate, and a lot of folks don't know what their company's rate is, but it is a really important number. The biggest benefits obviously are lower rates keep people safer every day, but the obvious truth is that it creates more revenue for your company. Based on the fact that you get charged lower insurance premiums and you can bid work at different rates, it gives you significant advantages to the way you do business. So next slide. So before we get into benchmarking the way we run our safety programs, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I'm passionate about, is injury-free. And they identified me in this as an expert. I consider myself to be far from an expert in safety. We have so many great safety professionals out there in the industry that are overwhelmingly smarter than I am. What I am is an advocate for folks not to get injured. And so I always thought of injury-free as being a value to the way I operated as a builder. And so injury-free to me means that every member of the project values safety. It's a behavior that we recognize that doing the job safely and doing the job right are both important project goals, that we take action to protect ourselves against the hazards, and we're rewarded for our effort to take that action. And that doesn't mean being the safety police, but it does mean to run a very disciplined program that keep people safe every day. And then we put in place the tools, equipment, expertise, and training, and quality of life measures that make people understand from a morale standpoint that we're really looking out for their welfare. So next slide, please. And so in an injury-free environment, we have supportive leadership. We have a personal commitment from every team member, and we have free and open lines of communication. Communication is the key. It is in every life cycle objective of a project, but particularly in safety. And we want people to go home each day in the same or better physical condition than they were when they arrived that day. So next slide. So there are some check the box items that we absolutely have to incorporate into any safety planning, and I'm just going to briefly run through those. So we have roles and responsibilities that need to be identified. All team members should participate in creating that injury-free culture. Compliance to regulations is paramount. There's significant state and federal requirements, and accountability, right? So we should have ownership in the morale and the legal and the financial ramifications of the safety program. And so next slide. So just as a first blush for people to think about, I think a safety startup plan is really important, right? Make sure you have a crisis management plan, right? You want appropriate crisis management because God forbid something really catastrophic would happen. We want muster areas. We want people to understand where and how they go about doing their business in the midst of this. We want to set up a hazard communication plan. This is state and federally mandated. We want lots of robust signage. We want to set up a filing system that makes sense for our safety program. Most projects, not all, need a lead survey. We want to complete that early. We want to complete an underground service alert program for the utilities that we may be impacting as we go through the project. We definitely want to post our medical and clinical hospital maps and phone numbers and all of those kinds of things in really good right to know areas for folks to be able to view that stuff. We want to set up an opportunity for improvement station. We want to set up hazard recognition card systems. Next slide. So what is crisis management? It really is, as I said before, the catastrophic occurrences that could potentially happen. God forbid we don't want it to, but we want to have planned for it so that we don't have any misunderstanding about where people should go and what they should do. It should be site specific. It should include the team members that are going to be responsible for specific tasks within that. And it should have contact information for all folks that would be impacted as well. And so next slide, please. We also want to make sure that we investigate in an appropriate way. And so I'm giving some examples here of how we do that. We have what's called a grab and go on the screen, where folks can just quickly grab the information, get out in the field, do an assessment of the situation so we can react in an appropriate way. Next slide, please. But then a more robust root cause analysis and final report needs to be done. So this is independent of that grab and go, where we take down the initial information around what has happened on our job site. We do a more thorough and detailed background on the things that occurred and the whys. So next slide. We want to have a right to know area. It's required by law, obviously. We want to be specific about it. We want it to be easy for folks to access. We want our MSDF sheets there. We want our site-specific safety plans there as well. And we want any OSHA reference that we can provide to our team to be able to quickly look up what is required for a specific situation when they run into it in the field. Next slide, please. So what is your site hazard analysis plan? Do you have one? We certainly should, right? Because we want to analyze particularly the big rocks that we're going to push on a project. I'll say demolition, skin, concrete, interiors, roof, all of those things need to be analyzed ahead of time. And we need to put together a hazard analysis plan where we can pick out the things that typically would trip us up in a safety situation. We want to have an emergency plan for our project, and we want to obtain proper permits, and that's anything that's associated with the work And then we can do an analysis as well of the hazards that would result from the requirements of those permits, right? The authority having jurisdiction is going to require certain things of us, and we certainly want to analyze those things to make certain that we haven't or aren't going to put our folks in a compromised position. Next slide, please. And so the next question is, how do you orient your subs, right? And these are things to think about. We want to review sub-safety requirements, not only with the subcontractor once he arrives on site to prosecute the work, but we really would rather do that with him before we put him under a contract obligation, because quite simply, the behavior is shaped based on the requirements of the project first, and then we can manage that good behavior even more robustly when we get them to the field, right? So we want to conduct a pre-bid meeting. We want to make sure that safety is a value to their company, right? We want to conduct pre-construction meetings once they've been assigned the work and brought to the job site. We want to make sure that we evaluate what work they're going to take on and their opportunity to manage safety appropriately. We want to determine who their safety coordinators are, both on-site and off-site, right? So we have a line of communication with the folks that can most positively impact safety on the project. And then obviously we have a requirement to collect the MSDS sheets. Next slide, please. Orientations, a really good teaching tool for subcontractors to understand that we value safety. It's not about the mandates, again. It's about getting them together to understand that we care about them as much as they should care about themselves, right? And we don't want them cutting corners just for the sake of the job progressing. We really want to make sure that they do it in the most appropriate environment. And so we want general contractor personnel. That would probably be our people in my world, and subcontractor personnel, right? We want the owner to take part of this, because it really tells the story to the rest of the team that everybody is valuing safety. And we want to bring our vendor personnel in as most is appropriate. I worked a lot in healthcare, and so we had a very robust vendor pool of folks that had to come on our active job site to install equipment. And we want to make sure that those folks are well versed in the requirements for the project as well. And then a visitor sign-in log is always an important component of our safety program. Next slide, please. So now we'll start to get into some of the ways that we think globally from a holistic company standpoint, we can reduce EMR and it can become part of the strategy of the firm. Next slide, please. So define your program early, right? Get buy-in from your executive level. Not only the company-wide program, but then individually, it sets the opportunity for teams in the field to be able to get their site-specific program in place. Allow for innovation, right? There's a lot of great ideas out there. Again, I'm no expert, but I value safety a great deal. And so I leaned on my safety professionals, the folks in the industry with that industry knowledge, our subcontractors at every level, right? The craft worker in the field, and innovation comes from the strangest places, and it allows us to put in place measures that keep people safer more often. Collaborate with your trade contractors, right? Really define your root causes. So I talk a lot about the 5 whys. And so most of the time when we do a root cause analysis of an incident, particularly, we really don't dive deep enough into that incident to understand what the real issue was. So we want to say, why did you believe that behavior was appropriate? And then, well, why were you thinking that way? And then why would your boss think that way? And so on and so forth, to get down to the real root cause of the behavior that compromised us from a safety standpoint. We want to plan our safety, right? So if you think about lean, and obviously I can't talk to each one of you to know if you know what lean is, but it's a methodology around planning in construction. And so you plan safety that way as well, right? Just-in-time deliveries, right? First-in-place inspections of work and how people are going about their work. Site logistics being the most important principle as it relates to safety. And so we want to define safety from a planning standpoint. Create contractor safety feedback suggestion areas, right? I used to find an area where most of the craft workers would migrate, and we would put up, a couple of 4x8 sheets of whiteboard, and we would put markers out and allow and empower our contract employees to make suggestions about safety that then we could decide to implement or not as a program and part of the process. And what it did is it left an empowering effect on our trade workers, and it really made them feel like they had buy-in into the program. And then turn incidents into opportunities. And I think this is really important. And so even if it's a near miss, if we go and we really analyze it in an appropriate way, we'll find that we have opportunities to improve our program because nothing is obviously perfect, and we want to always look for continuous improvement. And so I think the more you evaluate an incident, no matter how insignificant it might feel to you at the time, I think it's an opportunity for us to improve. And so next slide, please. And so we've got opportunities in certain areas to make improvements, and I identify a few. So pre-construction in contracts, I mentioned this earlier, but instructions to bidder are so very important because it really helps us to understand the behavior of a particular organization and whether or not they're the right people in the room for us to hire to do work for us. Once we get the remarks back from the instructions to bidders, it gives us the ability to enhance the fully executed contract. And so that way we can put in place some measures that really shape the behavior that we're looking for on our sites, right? Make sure that the certificates of insurance are appropriate, and make sure we have an additional endorsement as a general contractor of ourselves, because we want to make sure that we've closed the loop of risk that exists out in the field. And so next slide. And so make sure that when you bring your subs on site, after the contract has been executed and they've been awarded, that you have your prime and tiered subs to participate, because a lot of times second tier subs don't get to participate in those kickoff meetings, and it really compromises us, because while the prime sub knows exactly what he needs to do, most times, more than not, that tiered sub has never been indoctrinated into that similar behavior, right? Make sure your pre-construction meetings are really robust, and you've got to document those, right? And make sure that it's distributed to the participants. I mean, good, bad, or ugly, they need to know what decisions were made, and it needs to be documented. So next slide. And then validate the requirements, right? So what are the training requirements, and how are they defined based on what work's going to be accomplished? And make sure the documentation is available. Again, the information is so very key to the work we do, because it is our history, right? And so if a tree fell in the wood and nobody was around to hear it, would it make a sound? It is really a basic tenet of construction. And so we tell ourselves anecdotal stories about what happened rather than document actually what happened. And I think that's really important. And then scope specific hazards need to be identified. We want to root out all of those things that we can tick off and say, these are the major causes for failure, and we've addressed these, and we make sure that we've talked about them and we've documented them. So next slide, please. And then there's systems that really need to be in place, right? And so from a documentation standpoint, job site audits are really important. They need to be accurate. They need to be on file, and everybody does them. Everybody. I fully accept audits from, the guys that are excavating for a duct bank to go in. I want audits from anyone on the staff, because I believe that we have the ability to improve from those. Next slide. And so meeting cadence is another system that really helps to reduce that EMR and increase our safety on site and productivity. We want weekly safety meetings with the entire project. We want to define the agenda and make sure that everyone knows that we're going to talk about things that are specific and measurable to what they are performing on the project. And we want to document. And then subcontractors, we have an expectation that they would also perform their own meetings based on their specific scope of work, right? And we call these a lot of times toolbox talks, but we want the subs to really talk to their folks about the value of the behavior of working safely. And we want them to plan their safety. Next slide, please. We want really robust signage. And I mentioned this all the way in the beginning. I can't stress enough how valuable signage is to a construction project. And the more of it you have, the better your project will function. And make it fun and creative at times. And even get some feedback from the team about what types of signage that they would appreciate, because it's really important for not only the folks that enter that site, but also the public to understand that your attention to safety from a detail standpoint is very high. Next slide. And then training. Training is a four-letter word in a lot of ways, but not with safety. We really need to make sure that our folks are highly trained, particularly as it's appropriate to their scope of work, right? That they understand regulation, they understand equipment, and most importantly, that they have a competent person that they can lean on. We all know this, that there's not usually a safety professional for every subcontractor on a particular project, and a lot of times not a safety professional for the CM or the GC. And so we want to know who these competent people are. We want to verify that their training is up to the level of training required to operate as a competent person on that particular project, and we want to have all documentation that backs that up. Next slide. So a few things from an innovation standpoint that I wanted to just review with you, and it's food for thought. Next slide. So pre-task planning. I know a lot of firms domestically and worldwide do this. The question in my mind sometimes is, do we do it well, or is it just a check the box kind of activity? What pre-task planning is it's the ability for us to get down to the crew level conversation around safety for a specific task that's going to be performed in that specific time frame. And so if our crew is starting on a Monday morning and I'm the drywall contractor and we're going out to frame walls on level 1, I want to make sure that crew has discussed safety and the concerns of that particular area of work on that particular day, hour by hour. And I want all of the team members to communicate to us what they see as hazards, and I want them all to commit or sign off on that pre-task plan, saying that they've reviewed and accept the measures that we put in place for those activities, right? And so the benefits from it, really, the documentation is completely secondary to me. The benefit is that we've given our craft workers at that level an opportunity to provide feedback to us about the potential risks that they're putting themselves in front of as they go to do day-to-day tasks. And I think it's really important for them to be able to own that. It removes some of their self-interest and creates a better level of accountability, in my mind, for them to then go and be safe in the areas of work that we assign to them. Next slide, please. Quality of life. I think this is such an important topic, right? Because so many times I think, we go on projects and we see things that are less than standard human operation, and so really dirty facilities and really just arduous parking requirements and not really good facilities for folks to be able to go and sit down and eat lunch. And I think if you provide a better quality of life, and you equate that to the safety program, I think you've really done yourself a service in telling a story to your craft workers around how important you believe them to be to you. And so that's the behavior from management, from a supervisory level, that really will get a lot of benefit with relation to how these craft workers will perform for you as you're trying to move through this very difficult task of building something. So I think it's really important that we pay attention to quality of life. Next slide, please. And so we created this in my former life, and it was called a 2-minute drill. So this is an enhancement to our pre-task planning. And this is really a lanyard badge, and we're showing two sides here. And so what the 2-minute drill was designed to do was define a set of questions and reminders to our craft workers around the work that they were doing. Because, you know, in the midst of a pre-task plan, we might get called into a different area of work, and we may have forgotten to do a secondary pre-task plan. But this gives the craft worker an opportunity to ask themselves some really serious questions about what he's getting ready to get himself into, and is the area really safe for him to work in. We put quality in the conversation because you know, safety is really important, but the quality of one's work is just as important. As credit card sized hanging badge that went along with the badging of employees as they came to our projects, and the crews would review it quickly before starting new tasks. And frankly, it was, you know, a 1-minute drill, but it really gave them a sense of what was going on out in the field. Next slide, please. And then a wheels program. So we all know how difficult it is when our laydown area starts to get taken up, and we're putting stuff up on dunnage, and it's laying everywhere, and then we got to go back and try to work around those things. And we came up with an idea of really trying to put everything we possibly could up on wheels, because, you know, how many times have we all went out and found a drywall contractor on a ladder on top of a stack of drywall? And so we want to mitigate those risks, and if we employ something like a wheels program, and folks have to get into those areas where material is being stored, they can quickly move that stuff into a different area and get to the access of the work that they want to. And so you review this through your site logistics, and you provide the guidance to the team for enabling the behavior. And then you employ a lean term called PDCA, which is Plan, Do, Check, Act. It really gives you some visibility to the teams of you're looking out for their welfare and best interest. Next slide, please. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura.
Awesome. Thanks, John. So let's take a look at how BIM 360 can help you specifically enhance your safety program. So a well-designed mobile safety program can enable a number of advantages to all of your job site safety operations. The first one on here is that using a mobile device is going to allow field workers to document site conditions in real time. So this is going to improve the quality and timeliness of that gathered data. And it's going to allow you to have your decision making be based on leading indicators. The next one on here is increased productivity. So I think it's fairly self-explanatory that digital checklists are going to allow that the speed of recording and observation to be greatly increased. So you can quickly check off safe or unsafe behaviors, and that's going to allow you to perform and document more safety observations over time. Not only that, but I do want to stress that the connection between your mobile device to the rest of the BIM 360 platform is going to give you great efficiencies in allowing your safety program to be integrated with all of the operations throughout the project lifecycle. This is going to connect all of your safety information and all of those operations to everything that you have stored within the BIM 360 platform. All of your project data allows 2D and 3D to be connected. So there's a lot of efficiencies gained there with leveraging that platform. The other thing here is that the instant collection and sharing of this information is going to greatly improve your office and field communication. Now, when somebody in the field notices a safety issue, they can report it to the office to resolve that immediately. That's going to make that information available to anyone else who might encounter it or need to take action based upon that data. It's also a great way of connecting remote teams. As John mentioned before, safety training is of great importance to your job site safety program. Leveraging all of that information and your training program on the mobile device allows you to take all pertinent documentation with you. You can hold briefings and safety trainings directly in the field where the context for your meeting is right in front of you. That can greatly improve the quality of your training and make sure that everyone understands exactly why they're there and what they're learning. And the last one here, BIM 360 is going to allow custom safety programs to be created and leveraged that are going to really tap into your company experience and expertise, and as well as lessons learned. So this is going to allow your safety program to be integrated with all of your other project information and available to all of your project team members. That's going to allow everyone to learn from collective experiences and make sure that safety as a culture within your company is going to become standard and readily available and visible to everyone involved. So this is a quick comparison between performing a process of a daily safety audit with and without mobile technology. So using digital checklists is going to allow you to skip a number of steps, which I think is pretty well visually represented here. You don't have to ever go back to the office to retranscribe your notes because you're taking them directly into the mobile device. You can skip uploading photos from your camera and associating it with an issue later because that can be done directly from the mobile device. You can also skip action items lists and making those together because when you create an issue, which I'll show you in a minute, you can assign a user role or company right directly from there. You can also skip sending specific reports or notifications to other stakeholders because having them all in the BIM 360 platform with you and leveraging the dashboards that are available means that they can get updates on all of this information in real time. So the automation of all these processes is going to give you a great advantage in mobilizing your safety inspections. So let's take a look at a short demonstration on the next slide. So here we have a fall protection safety inspection checklist on the BIM 360 mobile app. You can pass or fail items based on your observation directly from the field. If you find an item that fails or needs correcting, you can automatically create an issue without leaving the checklist. Add a description, assign your user role or company. You can enter location details, apply a due date. And as John mentioned before, you can also specify a root cause, which is really vitally important for tracking trends on your job site. You can also add photo evidence and context by attaching it directly to the issue. After that, you can return to your checklist and the issue will appear in line. All of this creates a more seamless inspection process with results that are instantly communicated to your team. So once we've collected all of that data from our inspections and all of the things that we're doing with checklists on our issues on our mobile devices, we can leverage Project Home and Insight within the BIM 360 platform to give teams controlled visibility into high-level issues across all BIM 360 services that are going to better help us identify risk. So the ability to analyze this information at both a project level and an organizational level helps teams identify subcontractors, types of projects, and other job site processes that are prone to risk, and makes it easier to correct measures and mitigate those risks by harnessing all of that data. So taking it one step further, we do want to remind you that we are working on very diligently something that we're calling Project IQ. This is currently in beta testing and is coming out very, very soon. Project IQ is going to help teams better manage risk by enhancing risk mitigation through machine learning and AI tools that improve quality and safety across projects by identifying risks on both individual projects and across projects, as I just said. So this method of assistive feedback helps teams understand leading indicators so they can start taking proactive measures before incidents happen. So on the next slide, You can see an example of a dashboard. So specific to safety, Project IQ helps project leaders and executives understand what risks are trending on their projects. It's going to identify which subcontractors to focus on and where their projects are carrying safety risks, so then you can follow up with specific action to create new training programs and mitigate those risks. We've talked a little bit about this before, but one of the great efficiencies and one of the great value-added things about BIM 360 is that allowing us to have a truly data-driven approach by connecting all of our various data sources. So to that end, BIM 360 also does support integrating with all of your point solutions that may or may not be safety specific. So what you're looking at here, for example, is a workflow that connects job site monitoring services with other AI software like SmartVid to turn observations that are being taken passively from cameras and other types of video and turning it into actionable data on your job site. So the more data or observations that we're able to collect and leverage through the BIM 360 platform gives us a better ability to understand what's happening on the job site, see where we are conforming with standards and where we're not, and then take corrective action sooner. All right, so just a reminder on how you can stay connected with us and a few resources. We do have a BIM 360 Resource Center. This is pretty new, so I encourage you all to check it out. With regards to BIM 360 product updates, it's a really great idea to subscribe to our release notes. BIM 360 is rolling out new releases all the time, so this is a great place to keep up with current technology. And you can stay tuned there to see when Project IQ is going to be released. Lastly, we have a Connect and Construct blog, which has a number of industry resources, information and blog posts just like this one that are focused on safety, some on quality or project controls. So something to check out if you're interested in some of our industry-specific resources. So at this time, I think we're going to run 2 more polls, if you can bear with us. So the first one here is, are you interested in learning more and want to speak with a product specialist? Pretty self-explanatory. We'll give that about 30 seconds. Cool. All right, and then did you want to do the second poll? Great, so we're running that now. So are you currently subscribed to a BIM 360 product? Are you a current customer of BIM 360? So, wanted to thank you all for your engagement today and for coming to the webinar. Wanted to remind you that you will all receive an email with a recording of this webinar following it, and you can check out the recording later on the Resource Center as well. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time.